We're going to install the X belt on our long arm frame for our robotics system. We need to make sure we have all of our parts and pieces ready to go so the process is smooth for us. We need to locate the bracket for the left-hand side of our frame, the bracket for the right-hand side of our frame, which includes our clutch release, our X belt. We need to have a screwdriver available that works well with the screws that are in our brackets. Mine happen to be Phillips head screws, so I have a Phillips head screwdriver. I have some zip ties here that I will use to anchor down the ends of my belt when I have it in place. And I also have some wire snips here. You'll need something that you'll be able to cut the ends of your zip ties off and cut any excess belt off. That's what you're going to need to get started. We're going to begin by installing our left-hand bracket. Remember, your left-hand bracket is the bracket with two strap pieces, and it has a little piece that comes out the front. The piece that comes out the front is the bracket that's going to hold your X belt. Your X belt is going to weave in and out the two tiny little holes that are here in the very front of the bracket. It's going to be important when we're putting this bracket on the left-hand side of our frame that this bracket is pointing inwards and that it is going to line up with the back side of our motor box here, because the X belt is going to run from this bracket through the gears on the back of our motor box and then all the way to the other side of our frame. So when I install this bracket, I do a couple of little things just to make it easier on me because it is kind of awkward and wobbly, and I'm doing this by myself and I only have two hands. So the first thing I like to do is with the top screw, I just loosen the nut out to the end, but I don't take it completely off. This may vary with the type of frame you have. This is just what I find easiest with the frame that I have, and a lot of people have similar frames. So the top screw that goes through the two pieces, I have the nut all the way out to the end. The bottom screw, I'm going to take the nut completely off and the screw completely out. So the two pieces can kind of swing on that top screw. I'm then going to take this and place it over my sidebar of my frame and just let it hang down so that I don't have to hold on to it while I'm replacing my large screw and nut through the bottom. Remember that the top of the screw goes through the inside with the nut on the outside. We're just matching what's on top. I'm going to just do this finger tight right now just to get myself started, and I'll tighten the top one as well. Once I have it kind of finger tight but still movable, I'm going to move this into place. Remember, I want to align the little bracket that sticks out where my X belt is going to go with the back gears on the back side of my motor box. Those little pulleys is where my belt is going to weave through. So for me, I actually have to push my bracket back as far as I can go and upwards as high as it can go. But it may vary with your machine. Just use your best judgment, and remember, you can always loosen those screws and readjust it if you need to. Here's where I'm going to grab my Phillips head screwdriver and just tighten up the screws so that this doesn't move. You don't have to make this super tight where the back bracket strap is bending too much. You just don't want it to move. Just want it on there pretty snug. So if I'm pushing on this really hard, it's not going to move. So my left bracket is all installed. We'll go on to the right one next. Now it's time to install our right bracket. It looks pretty similar to our left bracket, but it has our clutch release on it. You'll notice that the clutch release swings a little bit, and we'll get into that later when we're actually putting our belt into place. But you will see on the front of the clutch release, we do have the same metal bracket that's on the left side of our frame with the little holes in it for us to put our X belt. So we're going to be pretty familiar with this style. Again, the same thing that we did on the left side, we're going to do on the right side. With my top screw, I'm just going to release the nut out to the end of the screw to give me as much wiggle room as I can without actually taking it apart. Because again, I only have 2 hands. For the bottom screw, I'm going to take the nut completely off, and I'm going to push the screw completely out. That way my 2 pieces swing freely. I'm going to come over to the right side of my frame on my sidebar piece of my frame, and I'm going to slip the bracket over and let it just hang there. And remember, your clutched piece with the piece that we are going to attach our belt to is facing inside. I'm going to go ahead and replace my screw with the head of the screw inside, pushing outward, and then I will put the nut on the outside. And we're just mirroring what's on the top screw. Again, I'm just going to be very gentle and finger tighten this into place to give me a head start. And then before we tighten it down with our screwdriver, I want to make sure that we are kind of in line, again, with our motor box and those pulleys that are on the back side where our belt is going to weave in and out. So for me, again, I kind of want to mirror what I did on the left side. I need to push my bracket back as far as it's going to go and as far up as it's going to go, because in that position, when I have my locking mechanism in place, my little bracket that holds my X belt is fairly in line with the pulleys on the back side of my motor box. You may have a different frame, and this may fit differently. And remember, you can always release your screws and adjust as you need to. Since I'm in place here, I'm going to go ahead and tighten my screws with my screwdriver. And remember, we want to get it snug, but we don't want to make the back strap bend too much. We just want to make sure it's not going to move on us. Oh, see, that wiggles a little bit. I need to tighten it a little bit more. And there we go, nice and solid. So we are all set with our left and our right brackets being in place. It's time to start with our belt. Time to install our X belt. We're starting on the left-hand side of our frame with our left-hand bracket. Remember that our belt is going to connect into the little metal piece that sticks out from our whole bracket unit. We've already talked about the belt going in the 2 tiny holes that are in the very front of this bracket piece. We need to take our X belt and release it from any tie that is on it. When you do this, it might become a bit of a mess, so just try not to get too many kinks in it as you're unwinding it and letting it fall to the floor as you're doing your work. We don't want it to bend too much. To install our belt on the left-hand side of our frame, we're going to take one end of our belt and we're going to take it and push it upwards from the underside of our metal bracket to the top side of our metal bracket. We need to have our teeth of our belt facing upwards. That is how they're going to go through our motor box. So remember, the teeth have to face upward. So we have pushed the end of our belt from the bottom side of the little metal bracket up out to the top side in the inside hole. We're then going to weave it back down to the outer hole. And when we do that, the teeth are going to kind of grip onto and kiss each other right here. That's exactly what we want. So you won't see any teeth here where we've woven them through, and you won't feel any teeth on the bottom because our teeth are top side up. We want about 2 inches, 2.5 inches of extra play here. And that's all you really need. We're going to zip tie this into place. I'm just going to put my belt down, grab a zip tie, hold my belt and my little extra tail together, wrap my zip tie around it, thread it through, and pull it tight, maybe about an inch from the end. I want to make sure that this end is nice and snug because I'm going to pull the whole rest of my X belt all the way across my frame and be working with it down on the other side. So this is kind of my base point, my starting point. I really want this to be in here nice and snug. I'm going to use those clippers that I had to clip off my tail here of my zip tie so it just stays nice and neat and clean for me. So I've got that nice and snug in here. Nothing moves. You can see that my teeth are facing up as I would be pulling this across my frame. I've got about 2 inches sticking out from the edge of my bracket here. And we're ready to pull across our frame. Since my belt is anchored on the left-hand side of my frame, I've go ahead and stretched it all the way across to the right-hand side of my frame. My belt right now is just loose on the backhand side of my motor box. You can see I can move the carriage with my machine and my motor box on it, and it's not touching my belt at all. I want to make sure that there are no twists or anything in my X belt and that my teeth are always facing up. I'm going to come all the way over to the right hand side of my frame and my right hand bracket, and I want to weave my belt in the same manner as I did before. I want to start on the bottom side of the metal bracket, and I want to bring the other end of my X belt through the inside little hole and bring all of this length that I've got left over from my belt and just bring it upward and then weave back through the inside hole, coming back down in the other direction. I don't want to make this too tight or anything. We're just trying to get this stabilized so that we can work with it a little bit easier. We still have to weave this in our motor box, but this at least gets it strung from one direction to the next where we can work with it just a little bit. See how loose it is down here? That's okay with me because we have to weave it in our motor box first, then we'll work on tightening it with our tensioner. I just wanted to get it across my frame, making sure that the teeth are facing up across the whole way of my X belt. For all of you who are visual people, I want to just show you going through the right hand bracket with the clutch on it with our X belt. So if we just swing this up and extend it so that we have our metal bracket with the 2 holes in it facing in towards our frame, we are going to take our X belt with the teeth pointing up. From the bottom side of the metal bracket, we are going to insert the end of the X belt through the inner hole. Pull as much of our X belt through that we can. We don't want it too tight because we still have to weave through the back side of our motor box. So we're going to take the tail that we've pulled all the way through and put it back down through the inner hole on our metal bracket and just pull our belt on top of itself. And again, we don't need to pull our belt super tight yet because we still have some things to do to get it through our motor box, and we will have to work with our clutch here to get our tension correct. Well, this is a funny little camera angle. I am currently having y'all look at the back side of my motor box. You've got 3 little pulleys on the back side of your motor box, and we will be weaving our X belt, which I've got hanging out all the way down here. We'll be weaving that through our different pulleys. Now, you can see how slack my X belt is right now so that we can have plenty of availability of belt to weave on through. So we didn't want to pull it too tight when we were stringing it from the left to the right side of our frame. We'll work on that a little bit later. The first thing we want to do is we want to take our belt and we want to weave it over our first pulley here. So we want to get that just snug in position. Then it's going to go under, so over first, then under our second pulley. And this second pulley, you can kind of feel the teeth that are on it, and they kind of match up with the belt. Then we're going to weave back over our third pulley. So it's a over, under, over process. But the whole time your teeth are facing upward. The belt never flips. So the smooth side of the belt is touching this pulley and this pulley, but the teeth side of the belt is touching this pulley. So now that we've got that in place, we will be able to work with the tension on the right side. So remember, over, under, over. So now it's time to get the tension right on our belt. As you can see, we are pretty slack here on the right-hand side of our belt. We've got a little bit more tension on the left-hand side here, but it's still very wobbly. When setting the tension for your belt, I always like to make sure that my machine is in the center of my frame. That way I can get as even a tension on both sides as possible. We're going to now turn to the right-hand bracket so that we can work on pulling our tension tighter. Now, we're going to take our belt and all of its slack and just tug on it to get it a little bit tighter all the way across our frame. We're also going to pull this through our metal bracket just like we wove it through earlier, but we're going to do this with a little bit more intention. We want this to tighten up and not be quite so slack. So I'm going to pull that through and kind of tighten that up for myself. So that's a lot better. There's a lot less slack in it right now. So now we need to test it and see if this is what we want. We're going to work with our clutch system. So right now your little metal bracket is sticking straight out with the belt attached to it, and we've got all of our leftover belt just hanging out there. Your clutch system is kind of this little rounded unit that's pointing downward. It's got 2 little tiny holes in the bottom. So for me to remember how to use this properly, I just put my fingers on the little tiny holes that are down here on the bottom, and I pull it up towards me. Now I'm pulling it and it's stopping. It's not letting me go any further. That means that I've already got too much tension in my belt for my clutch to lock into place. So we pulled our belt a little bit too tight. I'm just going to push my clutch back down, and we need to take this extra belting that's hanging out here and give a little bit more slack to our belt. So I'm going to push a little bit of that back through. And so this is going to be a little bit wobblier. I'm going to then grab my little clutch by the little tiny circles with my 2 fingers and pull it back into place again. I've still got too much slack, so I'm just going to go back and forth a little bit. This is where it kind of gets fiddly, and you want to make sure that you have it right. You know, with your X belt, you want to have about, I'm going to say, 1 inch to 1.5 inches of slack in your belt, but you don't want much more than that. So we're going to go ahead and flip this back into place. I'm getting closer. So I'm just going to inch this in here little bit by little bit, a couple teeth at a time. You don't want to over tighten it again. So we're going to just inch that back. Oh, I need it just a little bit tighter in there. You know, this gets fiddly, but if you're patient with it, you're going to have the tension right and your robot's going to run really well. I think I moved that probably another like 5 teeth. I kind of do it by teeth. And I think we are there. So I've got about an inch of slack here. And if I come down to the other side, the left of my robot, let's swing you all around. Just going to double check over here. I've got about an inch of play here. So I've got an inch of play on each side of my robot in my belt. So I think we've got that just about right. So from here, what we want to do is grab another zip tie. And we're going to come back over to the right. And we're going to take the piece with all the extra on it, lay it on top of the belt that's attached from left to right. So our teeth kiss each other and they lock into place. We want about 2 inches, 2.5 inches worth of tail, just like we had on the left-hand side. We're going to put another zip tie in place. So I'm going to zip tie down about 2 inches of leftover on top of our belt and get that nice and snug. Our belt's still nice and snug, and then we can cut off our excess zip tie as well as our excess belt because you don't need all this extra, and you are set and ready to go now that your X belt is installed. We hope you enjoy your new robotic system and happy quilting.